And I've got a guest from northern Vancouver, Canada. His name is Sam Thiara. Sam does a ton of things from storytelling to writing, but he's an educator, he's an entrepreneur, community advocate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he's here to talk with me about engagement, but also some of the trials and tribulations that he experienced as a young child of Indian descent being raised in Canada, his journey back to India, but also his experiences as he found his way as a professional after graduating from college and dealing with some of that lost and lonely and confusing time that I think is so relevant today. So Sam, thanks for being with me today.
David, thank you for having me. And I look forward to being able to share some insights and hopefully some things that your listeners can walk away with.
Well, I'm sure we're going to find a ton that they'll be able to walk away with. So I know the book is called Lost and Found, and it's really a book about how you kind of go into your past to understand who you are, or to figure out who you are. But what got you to the point why Lost and Found? Were you at a point in your life where you felt lost? And can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I mean, and it was one of those things that I didn't start out feeling lost, but the older I got, the more lost I felt. I mean, I'm a British-born Canadian. My parents are from Fiji Islands, and my grandfathers and my ancestors all come from India. I mean, visibly, if you look at me, I look Indian. And it wasn't uncommon for people to say, "What part of India are you from?" And I say, "Well, I was born in England and raised in Canada." And they're like, "No, no, no, your parents, what part of India?" And then you say, "Well, they're from Fiji Islands, which is near Australia." And then they're like, "Wait, are you Indian?" And it's like, "Well, my grandparents are from India." Or others who say, "Wait, you're not Indian, you're Canadian." And it always amazed me that even though you say all that, they say, "No, really, where are you from?" I'm going like, "I don't know, planet Earth? Where?" But I remember leaving England as a wee lad. I was only 4 and I landed in Vancouver, Canada, where a family sort of established its roots. And you grow up as a Canadian. I mean, you think of yourself as Canadian growing up in that society, or even though our primary school and high school was predominantly white, and there was maybe a small group of visible minorities, but you never saw that. And I always describe it as, if a duck's egg rolled into a swan's nest and it hatches and it sees the swan, it immediately thinks of itself as a swan, until one day it's swimming with the swans and it looks at its reflection and realizes, "Wait, there's something different about me. I don't look the same as these other people." For me, it was in high school, being, thinking you're Canadian, and, you've got your friends and you're walking in the hallways as a grade 8 student. And all of a sudden you get hit and knocked down to the ground by an older kid who said, "I don't like Indians." And you look at him going like, "But I'm Canadian." But to him, I wasn't. To him, I was foreign and I shouldn't have been there. Why are you even here? But what was interesting is and that high school wasn't the best of times for me because of that realization that that's where that reflection into the water suddenly made me realize I wasn't the same. But it's when I got to university and a much more global audience was there, people from all around the world. But then there was also a lot of people from the ancestral backgrounds of India, Pakistan, and all of those regions. And they were talking and sharing about their cultural identity. And, they would ask me, "What part of India does your ancestral roots or do you come from?" And it felt like I was missing something because they had something, which was that cultural piece that I was lacking. And that's where I think it motivated me to start searching myself for that identity piece. And then as a result of it, I decided back in 2004, I think I want to go to India to experience this culture in a much more closer way. The benefit is I went to Fiji prior to it, where my parents are from. And it was interesting because when I landed in Fiji, it was the very first time I saw people that were just like me. And it was like, all of a sudden, I was like, "Wait, this really resonates." And then India, which was a totally different experience, though, it's the reason I went there was to realize this identity piece, because that was lost. So I went in search of it. And David, it was interesting because all of a sudden, when I was in India, my life prior to it was always what I would call a thali. And a thali in Indian cooking is a platter with segmented dishes. So I'm British, Canadian, Fijian, Indian, and for 11 years I played in an Irish military pipe band. So maybe there's some Irish chutney on the side there, but they were all segmented. But my realization as an epiphany in India, actually, I'm khichdi. Now, khichdi is an Indian rice dish, which is a blend of flavors, a blend of spices, and it's all mixed together. And I realized I'm not a thali, I'm khichdi. And that analogy has actually helped a lot of people from North America to Asia to Middle Eastern culture. But everybody suddenly says, wait, I'm khichdi too. I'm a blend of flavors.
Yep.
And that I think has really helped me to realize my identity.
You remind me of when I was a kid, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but when I was a kid, there was an Indian family that moved across the street from me, and they had a son. He was a couple of years younger than me, and I used to tease him relentlessly. So I'm apologizing right now to the world. And he was such a nice little kid, but he was different. So I teased him. And I remember one day he was out in the yard and I was just teasing, never hurting him, but still verbally making fun of him. And he sounded different. He looked different. And I remember him just shutting the garage door crying. And I felt so devastated that I did that. And there was no reason for it. And when you were telling that story, I'm like, oh God, that was me. Just a jerk, like just a jerk. And for no other reason than he looked different. He sounded different. And the reality is, when we were in elementary school, I want to say it was 4th or 5th grade, our elementary school merged with a few other elementary schools. And we had kids come from all over the place, different backgrounds and social backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, cultural backgrounds. And there was almost an immediate like war on the playground.
Oh, wow.
And, they're not like us and we're not like them. And at recess, there would be fights, which I rarely participated in, but I would observe. And it was strictly because you're different than us. And so we were these ignorant little kids that didn't know anything. We had never left our neighborhoods,
right?
But we just assumed we got to protect this territory. It's so humiliating to even admit that as an adult, having met people from all over the world. But it's just so unfortunate. And I'm thinking back to you in high school, and I didn't know you, but you're walking down the hall. You don't know anything different. And all of a sudden somebody tells you, nope, you're different. That's got to be a wild feeling, a really unpleasant feeling.
It is, because of the fact that it's suddenly brought into surface. Wait, I am different.
Yeah.
And will I ever be accepted as Canadian? I mean, prior to it, we play hockey, we eat hot dogs, we scrape our knee, we bleed maple syrup. Yeah, I'm Canadian. But to some people, and it's all about perspectives. And it's always interesting because we hold perspectives as our truths, but they're not the truths. Mm-hmm. And, for example, I've been to the Middle East numerous times for work. And people tell me the very first time I went, they said, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Do you realize, have you not seen the news how dangerous that place is? And I'm landing in Kuwait, which is right next to Iraq, which was going through major upheaval. They said, the kidnappings, the bombings, the shootings, aren't you afraid of all of that? And I went. When I came back after the first trip, and it wasn't just Kuwait, I went to the entire region for work. They said, so how dangerous was it? I said, oh my gosh, it's extremely dangerous. And they're like, really? Like, what did you see? What did you observe? I said, I tried to cross the road and it was so dangerous. They're like, what about the rest of the stuff? I said, do you realize it's safer for me to walk around midnight in Bahrain than it is for me to walk around the streets around here? And it's not because I look like I fit in. Even my Canadian friends who were on tour with me said the same thing. It is so safe in that region. But we hold our perspectives. And again, it goes back to what you were saying, us, them. This whole idea is that we segment and we separate, but instead what we need to have is this open dialogue, this realization of what different people bring as this whole collaborative piece, because everybody has something to contribute and, makes us much richer. Because I've taught in university for many years, I am surrounded by greatness and I am surrounded by people from all around the world. David, do you know that I could go pretty much anywhere in the world and I've got families that are waiting for me to arrive because I've spent time with their kids? I mean, how great is that?
Oh, it's fantastic. I wanted to kind of get into that, the
Yeah,
whole, talking about kids and even the last 2 years and the impact
yeah.
of, the dynamic in the world and
Mhm.
all that on kids and learning and education and in particular engagement. And this whole lost thing,
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't really know where to begin here, but I know that there's a whole story of when you got out of school and all the rejection you felt. And I'd like you to expand on that, but also
Mhm.
maybe correlate that with what you're observing right now with some of these young people in
Yeah.
school and how disconnected and lost and disengaged they might be feeling.
Yeah, no, I always say I needed to have gone through the fire in order to be doing what I do today. I mean, to your point, exactly. I mean, I went to university, I graduated with a degree in business and political science with this. At graduation, sitting there, I remember walking across the stage and it felt like a giant virtual door slammed behind me because everything familiar to that environment was left behind once I crossed that stage. And I sat down and I said, okay, what am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to apply for jobs. Now, back then, we didn't have the internet and all of these resources. You actually had to type your letter or handwrite your letter, hand deliver it, or pop it in the mail. I remember shortly after graduation, I sent out 12 letters with a concept and an idea in my mind that business and political science, what a great combination. Who's lucky to get me? Well, 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from one of the companies. And the letter, when I opened it up, said, well, thank you for applying. We don't have a job for you, but good luck in your search. Hey, that's okay. You're not lucky to get me. And this idea was, I still have 11 letters out there, but you know what? I'm sending 3 more out. Sent out 3 more. It literally felt like the tide. The more letters I sent out, the more letters came back. And what I hold is 86 rejections. It's almost the size of a brick and weighs about as much as a brick, but I don't know why, but I kept all my rejection letters. Every letter was a nail in my coffin of self-confidence because I thought getting this degree was all I needed to get this, corporate job. And it shifted from, who's lucky to get me to, am I lucky to get a job?
Mhm.
Well, I finally got my first job and it was a government job, entry level government. So think of it, business and political science makes total sense. But my first job was being a janitor in a hospital, emptying rubbish bins, mopping floors. And it was interesting because it made me realize I wasn't ready. I mean, I thought I knew the direction I needed to go because I was focused on what I wanted to do, but I didn't know who I was. But out of that 86 rejections and then getting this job as a janitor, 3 valuable life lessons emerged. The first lesson, my father said, I don't care what you do, just do the best job possible because your reputation is on the line. And I remember him saying those. And then there was no floor cleaner than at the end of my shift. And, there was no rubbish bin left full. I did whatever I needed to do the best job. I still carry that mentality with me today in anything I get involved in. The second valuable lesson, I would get on the elevator with nurses, doctors, administrators, the professionals, and I'm a janitor. I would be ignored because we have nothing in common. I know what that feels like. I will never treat people like this. This is why I talk to everybody, and it's been about 5,000 conversations to date to help people because I know what it feels like. I will not reject you. I will not ignore you. I will listen to your story. And the third valuable lesson, rather than thinking of it from an absolute of, you know, I got my degree on the wall and the noise that's saying, you didn't need a degree for this, I realized there are lessons in life for me to pull out of anything and everything I do. So go in with a curious mindset to say, what can I learn from this today? Whether it's in school, work, your business, it doesn't matter. What am I going to learn as a result of being present today? So those 3 lessons carried me to who I am today. Now, thankfully, I was only there for about a year doing this, janitorial job. And then eventually the corporate job set in and I was able to get that corporate job. It took a bit of time, but David, it felt like the way I can describe it is, you know, I'm wearing a 52 short suit and I'm in an office full of people wearing 52 short suits. Now, what I mean by that is the suit much like this career, doesn't fit. But I can wear the suit, I can do this job, but it just doesn't fit. It's when I started shifting the narrative from what I'm doing here to who am I realized this was not the right job for me. And I started down a pathway, and I now call it the 5 core elements. In other words, what are the 5 things that I am not willing to compromise in life and career, not just career, but life and career. And I suddenly realized this was a totally misfit of a job that I was doing. But then I got into a job that just amazingly fit the 5 out of 5. And all of a sudden, that clarity emerged and it became a tailored suit. And all the things I've done beyond it to even present day hits 5 out of 5 of what's important to me. The way I describe it is, oftentimes we just go down a pathway that just seems, natural to us, but it's just, you do a finance course that you really like. Okay, I think finance is what really matters. Next thing you know, you do a co-op in a bank and or an internship, and you're like, okay, I can do this job. And then you get a job after you graduate, and then your positions varies through. And 30, 35 years later, what have you done? Was this actually the right pathway? And I've had people say, oh my gosh, Sam, I don't think I was even on the right train. I don't think this was the right job for me.
Yep.
So I try to catch them earlier in university right now, and I try to get them to do this. Now, that 5 core elements piece, the easiest way for me to describe it is you have to be reflective. So I would ask people, tell me about your current job or a previous job. What did you like about it? Didn't like about it, but tell me why. What about in school? What courses resonate? Which ones didn't resonate? Why? And what do you like to do in your spare time? Social life. Tell me why. And you go down a reflective pathway. So for example, somebody said, and this happens often, people say, oh, family's something I'm not willing to compromise. I said, okay, tell me why. Through the conversation, they'll tell me words like, yeah, it's the relationships and connectedness. And I apply it to their job environment, their school, and what they did in in their social life. And it's interesting because I say, does it matter in all of those 3 realms? And they're like, absolutely. And I said, okay, so instead of family, can we replace that family as one of those 5 core elements as relationships and connectedness? And they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So the idea is, what I try to do is provide them the compass. In other words, they are the needle. And what I say is, when you realize those 5 things that you're not willing to compromise, you now compare it to any opportunities that emerge. And then you see whether it lines up or not. I mean, if we build a house, we need a solid foundation. To build a life, we need a solid foundation. Now, the fear people have, David, is you're making me pick 5 things. What if they're not the right 5 things? I always tell people, you pick your 5, and as you go through life and as you go through career, you can change them as it lines up, but you keep on tailoring the suit. I don't know about you, but due to COVID, maybe I've put on a couple of extra pounds. Maybe I need to make that suit fit a little bit better.
Yep.
So then I just change my words. So and if I can catch it at the early stages in either university as a young professional, getting them to go down a pathway of what really resonates, I think that's what I would really be meant to be doing.
When you became a janitor after graduating, you had a degree,
Yep.
you take a job as a janitor, that had to be humbling. There had to be part of you that said, I cannot believe this is what I'm doing with a damn degree. I know what that feels like, not as a janitor, but I remember taking jobs in restaurants because I wasn't built to work in a company yet. I thought I was because I had a degree, but I couldn't interview to save my life.
Yeah.
And then when I would finish the interview, no one ever really called me back, or I'd get a rejection letter. So I ended up in the restaurant business. No, I don't disparage that. You ended up as a janitor, but there had to be part of you saying, what the heck is going on? Like, how did I end up here? So how did you get to a point where you were humble enough and patient enough to actually see that through? You had to believe it was going to lead to something.
Yeah. No, and that's, I think, the whole emphasis behind it is not to look at it as an end point, but as a starting point. But then the realization that I wasn't ready. So how do I prepare myself? And it's actually interesting, David, because looking at where I am today, working in that environment and all those projects and things like that, I now reflect back to say, that was an important piece in my life to help me get where I needed to be today. Without it, I don't know if I'd be here. And the interesting thing is those rejection letters, if one of them would have materialized, I wouldn't be with you today. My life would have gone in a different direction. The other part, though, is many of those companies no longer exist. I still do. I outlasted the companies. We're resilient people.
Right.
So you had to be humble to say, okay, here's my starting point. This is not the end point, but what am I going to do as a result? And that's where, it really was a challenge. And it goes back to one of my favorite quotes I use. Obstacles are the necessary bricks on a road to success. Do not fear the obstacles. Do not shy away from the obstacles. Embrace them, learn from them, because they're there for a particular reason. But oftentimes we reject them, or we're afraid of them, or we feel, why is this happening to me? I look at it from a different lens to say, okay, what am I learning? And I need this obstacle in order to help me move forward.
How much would you say, in your opinion, how much would you say the last 2 years of, COVID and the impact it's had on the quality of education and the engagement of students, especially as you inherit them from high school into college?
Yep.
Are you inheriting the same type of person that you would have maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Yes and no. So yes, on the one hand, everybody, whether it was pre-COVID, COVID, or even after, are going to still be lost. Like, in other words, there's a lot of noise telling them you should be a doctor, you should be an accountant, you should be this. And I've still got my students in class in person right now who are just really confused about, and they feel like they have to have it all sorted out right now. Like, no, you don't. I'm not saying be aimless and just, that's it, but let's build a foundation. What are the 5 things that you really feel right now that are important to you? And one thing that I do in my class, which is a really difficult exercise for them, it's simple, but it's really difficult, is I make every single student in week 2 write a personal statement telling me who they are, not what they do. And then we revisit it near the end of the semester if they want to change it around. But how would you introduce yourself? And they say it's one of the hardest exercises they've had to do because no one's ever asked them, well, tell me who you are. And I give them ideas and pointers on how to do it. I don't just say, okay, who are you? And then they're really scrambling. But this is where what I'm seeing is, COVID has certainly impacted individuals and the way we teach and how we've gone through it. But I mean, I thrive in ambiguity and uncertainty. So you know what, when it hit and on a moment's notice, we had to do virtual learning, virtual teaching. I changed it and modified it, but I was having a different type of engagement than prior to it. Like if you're in a classroom setting with 100 students and you're asking questions, generally, maybe 5 or 6 students, the exact same ones, unless I point to people, are going to be answering. Virtually, I'd put something out and say, okay, well, go to chat and put something in. David, I couldn't even keep up with what people were writing. That was that rapid, that fast, because of the anonymity.
Right.
So, we did see a change, but I also told my students, think of it this way. It's easy for us to say what we don't like about it. It's easy for us to say, the challenges, but what are the opportunities that we're missing here? Think of it this way. You're able to do my lecture whenever it's convenient for you, because not only do a live lecture, I do an audio voiceover PowerPoint slides if you miss it, or if you need to go back and see it. So you got that, which you normally wouldn't have. If you miss my lecture live, you're not going to have a live lecture. Equally at the same time, I said, you can, do this when it's convenient for you. And the third thing I said was, this may be the way of the world where employers are now saying, why are we using so much office space? Let's just create hot desks. And, David, you come in on Monday, Tuesday, Sam, you're in on Wednesday, Thursday, and the rest of the week you work from home. So maybe we need to get used to this and not, again, look at it from a negative standpoint or challenge, but how do we embrace it?
Sam, would you say you're the exception when it comes to, are you a professor or an instructor?
Yeah.
You're a professor.
I'm a lecturer.
Would you say your style is the exception to the rule? I ask because,
Mhm.
I've had the opportunity to see like videos, like sometimes the kids will come home and show me a video of a professor teaching or a teacher teaching, and it's painful to watch. Some of them, it's really painful to watch the style where they're just teaching curriculum that no one's read about it. It's just, here's the assignment and go do your thing. You strike me as somebody who's much more engaged. You're probably fueled off of that too.
Yeah.
Is that not the norm in your experience? Or
You know what? I would say in any industry you work in, there's always going to be a spectrum of, some instructors and professors are researchers and they're forced to teach. Others like me don't do research, but I really find I enjoy being in that environment where I'm teaching. And I think what my students have always said is, it's your stories that you bring in. And I always say when I teach my class, because I come from industry, myth, theory, and practice. Myth is what we believe the world to be. Theory is what somebody has come up with as a logical explanation of how something works. Practice is, does it work or not? That's the world I live in. So I take the theories and I say, well, this is great with regards to what it may tell you. For example, conflict in an organization. What causes conflict? One of the things, scarce resources. I hate to say it. Do you know what the textbook says for how to overcome that?
tell me.
Increase your resources. Great.
That's the answer.
That's the answer. I'm going to go to my manager and say, give me an extra $1 million and everything is fine.
Yeah,
perfect.
That's simple, right?
So this is where I live in the world of, no, this is what it's really like. Or as I say, what I teach in the class in let's say the textbook, that's knowledge. And knowledge is important. How do we apply it? That's wisdom. Yeah. I want it to be wisdom. So, I don't want to say I'm an exception to the rule. I've got colleagues that are great instructors and whatnot. I'm just in my own realm, but I just know that I really do connect with my students and my students connect with me. When they come to my office hours, it's rarely about the academics. It's actually about, let's talk about life.
Yeah. I have the same experience. I went to Zoom 2.5 years ago, reluctantly. I thought it was going to be a problem. It's been fantastic. It really has been fantastic. And the engagement has been excellent. But I think part of that is because I'm engaged. I am engaged with any client that I coach one-to-one, or if there's a bunch of them on there, they're never not talking. And as a result of that, they're never not learning. Even if they don't like it in the moment, they're never not learning. And when I think of engagement, I think it really requires somebody in your position to be engaged. Otherwise, I just think the disconnect is, I think about how easy it has been for a lot of students to get A's and B's over the last couple of years because they can Google whatever they want. Yeah. But if they're in a class with a professor or a teacher that forces the engagement, now they have to be present. It's not a matter of looking anything up at that point. Yeah, no. And I think it's also like, I've been given all of these experiences that I've gathered and accumulated. Added to that, though, it layered in is I really do care about my students and I care about their pathway and journey. And this is why it's been about 5,000 conversations and it's interesting. I've been at the university almost 18 years now. So there are still students that I mentored and coached 18 years ago that I'm still in touch with. And, now they're at the director level in an organization, but they're still reaching out to me saying, either let's grab a cup of tea, or they'll be like, Sam, I need to know what's my next journey. And let's talk about this. And actually, David, it's also interesting because many people come to me because they see me as a orange saffron bearded man on top of a mountain who's going to tell them what to do. I'm a monk. Okay, so I've got a bit of a beard. I live on the mountain, but I'm not orange saffron robed. I call myself a difficult monk because you come to me looking for the answers to life, and there's enough people telling you what to do. No, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions because the answers you're seeking lie within you. You are the monk, but I just need to ask those questions to get it out of you. Yeah. I think it's huge. What I've noticed with some of the young people that I've worked with and that I know personally is that they haven't been challenged or engaged for a couple of years. And then when someone shows up and asks questions, they don't know what to do. And I think about your question of who am I? I know people 50, 60 years old that can't answer that question. I know. You put that on a 20 something and they got to get their calculator out. It's interesting though, like I know the importance of that as a 50-year-old. I know the importance of going back to that square one. You told a story in one of your
Mhm,
interviews or one of your TED Talks, and you just referenced the doorstop, and the doorstop
mhm.
has a place. And you talk about the little tiny things. And how do you get people to recognize the importance of the most simple thing and why they should take an interest in those things to get this whole process started? What's your answer to that?
Because I think we go through life, whether we're a student or we work in a corporate setting or even as an entrepreneur, we're so focused on just putting our feet ahead of us. And I always say the routine takes over. And all of a sudden, we live in a world that seems very ordinary. But embedded in the ordinary are these tremendously extraordinary experiences that we've ignored, that we um, haven't really acknowledged. And the first TEDx speech I did was exactly about that: is how do you discover the extraordinary in the ordinary and realize the importance of what's there for you and how you should be going forward in life. So that's what my first TEDx speech was. And it was all about storytelling and, this concept of, curiosity, appreciation, reflection, perspectives, and experience is what guides you to discover that extraordinary in the ordinary.
But what caused you to all of a
Mhm.
sudden be interested in things that other people just blow by? You talk about
Yeah.
in that TED talk, what looking at footprints on the beach and how
Mhm.
they wash away each day. You become interested in that where
Yeah.
somebody else might say, Sam, what are you doing?
I know.
But how did you find that? How did you find
Yeah.
that quality within yourself to be interested in things that everyone else is just walking right past?
I think part of it is I thought I didn't even see it as I was exclusive in this. I always sort of saw things and always looked at it, but always was very reflective as an individual. And I think when I was asked to do the TEDx speech, all of a sudden the idea was, well, you tell great stories. And it's like, how can I tell stories? And I thought, okay, let me break it down. And they were like, but you find so much purpose and meaning in things that we might be missing. And that's where it suddenly shook me to say, maybe this is me, but maybe I need to be able to share this with other people. I think I've always been a bit on the reflective side and, looking at the deeper purpose and meaning, but I hadn't really thought about the process until this TEDx speech came up. And
Okay.
that's where I had to pull thoughts together to say, well, that's the process.
Yeah, it was very interesting. The simple things turned into a pretty cool talk. What about the whole thing about
Mhm.
the lost, the concept of being lost?
Yeah.
And we're talking about engagement today, but when you feel lost or excluded, or you feel like you don't fit, or you don't know where you're going and everyone else does,
Mhm.
how do you all of a
Mhm.
sudden, like, at what point did you feel engaged? Did you
Right.
feel found, or however you want to define it?
Yeah. And I think for me, I had to figure it out by myself. I had to figure out my own journey and a realization that, there are so many people lost. And part of what I always tell people is, you know, get a coach. A coach is there to guide and support you in the authentic journey that you need to go. I never had a coach and I've never had a mentor. I self-mentor through my writing and through my reflection. But now I've become solid with regards to helping other people in their journey. So I think if anything, find the person, and I always say the champion enabler, especially at the, you know, post-secondary level. A champion enabler is someone who's not going to tell you what to do, but a champion enabler is going to ask you those questions and support. Okay, so this is interesting to you. Well, let's go and explore, this area that you're interested in, and how can I help you get into this area, or, why is this an important area for you? So the champion enabler is going to be very important for that person.
That's good advice. When you were going through your lost period,
Mhm.
was there ever a point where you felt like you're not going to get out of it?
No, I think for me it was always the realization that I told myself that this is a journey, not a destination.
Mm.
And the fact that when it's a journey, you know that you're on a trajectory. And actually, when I was in that corporate job with the 52 short suit,
Mm.
my realization was I was on the wrong train. So when I started focusing on the 5 things I'm not willing to compromise, I got off that train at the next stop, got on the right train, and never looked back again.
What are your 5, just out of curiosity? I know
Yeah,
we talked
sure.
a little bit beforehand.
Servant leadership, story sharing, activator igniter, champion enabler, and community do-gooder.
Okay, so that's what guides you. Those are your 5 guiding
Yep.
principles. So if you don't see that in a relationship or in a job or in a client or
Yep.
whatever, you're out.
I am. And the idea is, because what happens is when I hit 5 out of 5, that hits fulfillment. But what I'm doing is I've got those 5 things and I compare it to opportunities. So being an author and a writer was never a goal or objective, but when it emerges, it hit 5 out of 5.
Right.
Being an instructor, a lecturer in university was never a goal or objective. And then when I was working on my master's, my associate dean came and tapped me on the shoulder. He says, I think you should be teaching. And I was like, oh, and then I explored it and it hit 5 out of 5. Uh, you don't have a job or career, you hit fulfillment when you can hit 5 out of 5.
How many people are willing to do that, Sam? And I'm not asking you for a number, but I get it. I totally get it. I feel the same way. I won't waste my time working with anybody where I don't feel great. I don't feel great enough. I don't feel like I'm making an impact. See you later. I'm only going to work with people that care, that share the things that I value.
Yeah.
How do you get to that point? Because in order to get there, I would assume you have to say no to a lot of people. You have to walk away from a lot of people. And
Actually,
you might need them. You might need them.
Actually, it's the other way around, because what I find is I don't go to them, they come to me. And because they come to me, they're already starting to think about, okay, this is who you are and this is what you provide. So, I'm willing to listen. And, and I look at it this way, I'm not going to impose anything on anybody. I'll give them whatever they need, and it's up to them to activate it. That'll be their choice.
So that's the fascinating part to me, because I think the way you approach it is the way it needs to be approached. First, you have to look inside and establish and know who you are and what you want and why, so those become your guiding principles. I wonder if that most people do the opposite. They're out there looking for a job. They're looking for a paycheck. I'll take what I can get. I'll settle for this because I can't hope for these things. So it really, the logic is the reverse. I mean, what you're saying is don't start on the other side. Otherwise you'll be wearing the wrong suit.
Yeah, no, totally. And I wrote a blog post that was had to do, have to do, want to do. Had to do means out of university. The reality is, you know what, you will have to take a crap job potentially. Okay. But look at it as, what am I learning and how is this going to help me? I think everybody should take a crap job in the beginning.
Yes.
But this is what you had to do. You had no choice. But then 5 years out, 10 years out, I'm having coffee with these people. And it starts out with, Sam, I just haven't talked to you in a while. I want to know who you are. No, I want to know how you are and all that. But very quickly, the conversation turns to, I've been in this job for 5 years. I think I'm ready for a change. What are your thoughts? And it's, what do I have to do? But to get to my want to do.
Yes.
So those are those conversations, had to do, have to do, want to do. My thing is, I want to get people to their want to do. And all of a sudden, they're experiencing what I experience.
It's like we live in a world where everyone gets put into a bucket, whether you want to or not. You as a kid, no, you're an Indian. That's who you are, and you've got to be in the bucket, and then you don't even know it. That's kind of how careers go, and then we do it to ourselves.
Oh, totally. And that's where I try to stop it. And having those conversations with people where, well, my parents want me to be a doctor, but I don't want to be a doctor. I'm like, okay, so let's have this conversation. And especially with immigrant parents, it's difficult because they want those professional designations. So somebody says, I want to be a digital marketer. I don't want to be an accountant. And then they said, well, can you talk to my parents? I said, no, you'll have to talk to your parents, but here's what you need to do. Make a PowerPoint, do your research, tell them this is what the job is and how much they get paid. Here's what the trajectory is. And, digital marketing, hey, the world is shifting and changing from robotic operations to, people who can code and do digital marketing and all of that. Like, this is where the world's going. Convince your parents. And then,
I just got LASIK surgery last Friday. So this is my first day doing one of these without any glasses on. But the guy that helped me out is he's 8 years in the US from Lebanon.
Mm.
And he was telling me, so he's in school studying to be an ophthalmologist, and both of his siblings are studying to be doctors here in the States, because what the parents said. But over there, he said, it's one of the few paths that we can take to get out of that situation. There's a lot of hostility, et cetera. I don't know all the ins and outs, but he was telling me if we pick the wrong path, we could be stuck with no food and no home and all that. So the parents wanted that, but more almost for safety and stability.
Yeah.
Do you observe that a lot as well as you talk to students from different places?
Absolutely. I mean, they've had especially if they've immigrated, I mean, they've put a lot of effort, and I respect that. They want what's best for their kids because they don't want the kids to go through the hardships they went through. Totally understand it. And I'm not going to say to a student that, your parents want you to be an accountant and you want to be, just a grocery clerk, and that's what you're really happy with. Then we have to have a conversation on why is that important to you, and, those sorts of things. But, I do respect the parent side is understanding. So the whole idea about it is not rejecting it, but understanding and realizing it from a broad perspective. Here's one perspective of what the parents want. Here's a perspective of what the child wants. How do we merge them together so that they're then happy with regard and accepting of each other's perspectives?
Okay, so in order to sum this up, what I'm
Yep.
walking away from is you help people identify
Mhm.
at the core who they are, what they believe, in order to ultimately have engagement in life. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a very fair assessment. It's in other words, providing them like a map, and they have the compass, and they are the compass, and to guide them in a certain direction, but it's their direction that they want to go.
Okay, I'm going to give you the last word, Sam. Anything that we didn't talk about that you want to comment on, and if so, there's that
Yeah.
piece, and the other piece is what kinds of people and or organizations might want to talk to you, and how do they reach you? If you could just kind of comment on both of those.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with the second part first. I mean, anybody can come right into my website, www.sam-thiara.com. I've got about 180 blog posts about life and these sorts of things we've talked about, all accessible and free. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, so they can always come into that space as well. The book I wrote both books are available on my website or on Amazon. But one thing I really want to really share with your people as we exit out of this is my favorite quote that I live by. Everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. In other words, we are all living stories. We are all writing our own autobiography, page by page, chapter by chapter. And it's not a challenge to go and do the most dangerous things to make it interesting, but realize that your stories have significance, and never feel that you should fear what people may think about your story, or that it's insignificant. You are here as a story and an autobiography. Always remember that, and there is significance in who you are and what you do.
Very powerful. Sam Thiara, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.